What do you think the biggest error about masculinity is today? What's the biggest misnomer ideology about masculinity? Anybody got any thoughts on that?
Just give me a moment. You started
That's
at the top of the
I kind of started with a heavy one there.
So repeat it one more time.
Yeah. What do you think the biggest error or misnomer or misconception about masculinity is today, the way it's conceived?
I think translation. You get somebody that translates something one way, and then they interpret the idea of that to everybody else, and they think that that's like the focal point of that. And when there's different varying degrees, you have. And what I mean is that masculinity becomes this misogynist thing all of a sudden, which can be the case, but that's not fair, especially for those guys. Chivalry isn't dead, for one. I'll just state that.
It shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be. I mean, it's gotten dim, but it's not dead.
But not everybody has to be a Clint Eastwood Terminator persona either.
No.
Right?
Yeah. But what's the basis of that? Protection? For the most part, you want, a good man wants to not just keep his family safe, but try to protect his environment too,
Right.
And again, you get a guy that is overt or a misogynist or somebody that's on a heavier level like that, and some people think that's throws us all in that bucket together, and I think that's the detriment. And that goes for many things, but for that, yeah.
Yeah. Do you think it's changed much over the decades of our life? Have you seen that?
Oh, you've seen. Back when we were growing up, back in the olden days.
Exactly.
Most young men would have been bolstered up by the idea of becoming masculine, right? Like you want to be.
Right.
I do think in our generation, the last 10, 15 years, though, I think men have become afraid to be masculine because a lot of people didn't like some of the stronger virtues of being a man, and obviously we've had a lot of male-dominated aspects of our culture. So women have been, rightfully kicking butt in some ways, but I think it's caused men to be afraid of still being a good, strong man.
Yeah. I've always been a bit of a wimp anyway. I was never that guy that would love to go take on the mountain or do
Well, for the
sports.
record, I've never thought of you as a wimp, Dave. So
What I mean by that is I was always just middle in the ground, so I didn't have really aspirations to be the strong guy that does the big thing. If you want to figure out what really is positive masculinity, ask your wife. Know what she's looking for. Because for me, it's like my presence with my wife, ability to be present and not defensive and present with her is something that's the biggest challenge. I think. So there's a side of me that I actually am not. I just feel like it's just hard to do sometimes.
yeah.
Remember once hearing about you have your option. You can either be a weak, strong man, or you can be a strong, weak man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so that obviously said, no matter what whatever you're gifted with physically, stature-wise, things that most men used to go, okay, I'm a strong man.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. You see those types of men all the time, but they're very weak. There's no moral character. There's no sense of chivalry. They don't live by a code.
Right.
And so they end up over time, however long it takes to unravel the story of their real life, you go, oh, that was a very weak man. So, I feel like where you started, the idea of if we were to regain the idea of masculinity today, it would be what's the appropriate way that I can live into my strength as not just a man, but as a person in the world. What do I bring to the table in a chivalrous way? I feel like that's a better way for young guys to think about it.
Yeah, every one of us, because of the era that we grew up in, we did have these strong male models. The John Waynes, the Clint Eastwoods, like you mentioned, Tim, and just so many. We grew up in the age of the Western. Right?
Oh, yeah.
There were at one point, there were 130 to 140 Westerns on the air at the same time.
Yeah.
So it was like I remember The Rifleman. You guys ever remember watching The Rifleman? I love The Rifleman.
Classic.
So somebody added up in all the episodes, he killed 950 guys. And at the end of every episode, it was he and Mark are Hey, you want a steak, son? Sure. And there's some 2 or 3 dead dudes laying there, and they're smiling, and the music's coming on.
Whiskey, some steak,
Yeah.
and some murder.
That's right.
Being a man. Yeah.
And it was looked at as like, man, the rifleman, this was a great father. He was a great father figure. But that's what we were baked into. And I remember back in the early 80s, when MASH, the TV show MASH was big, and Alan Alda, he was the star of MASH. And I remember he was like by Time Magazine or People Magazine or something, he was voted the sexiest man alive. And I thought, bull crap, man, this guy is a sissy. He ain't killing anybody. And but I just remember thinking, that's weak. But women were like, no, there's something about this guy, about who he is, his persona, and it was enough. It was the inside. It was that what you were talking about there a while ago. So very different. So it has evolved. Now, so let's talk about chivalry, and that's probably a word that you don't hear that word much anymore, right?
But it's literally how most men, in most epochs of history, there was a code. So Knights of the Round, it was love of king and country. But if you read back on some of the old chivalry, actually, if you want to read a great chivalrous oath today, read the Marine statements. Like most of our armed forces have essentially a code, not just a moral code, but a code based on duty. Like what's our duty? So a lot of I used to study the medieval codes, and they almost always had protection for the poor and the weak, and for women, interestingly enough. So it was just a code, doesn't matter what king you're serving. So there was something related to protection, there was strength, there was always internal virtues, they could not be bought. Would be a classic, chivalrous view. If you're going to work for the king, we want to make sure they can't slide enough money across the table
to buy you
out. So, when I'm talking with young guys, I usually I'll ask them do you have a code that you live by? And I've met some bad cats before, mafia dudes. I've met a guy here in Alton that was known as the roughest dude in town. And when we would meet, he had a code. His code wasn't my code, but I remember being impressed. At least you have a code. And he said, I've never done drugs. I've never done booze. I said, how you on the sex thing? He's like, I do a lot of that. But he goes, I don't see a problem with that. So, but he was true to his code. I said, how you doing on murder? And he's like, I'm getting better. It's like it's like Old Testament accountability. But he was an enforcer for a 1% biker club here in town. And but I just remember being at least impressed that the guy had a code and he stuck to it. And he actually said, he goes, I never lie. And he goes, I don't have to. I was like, okay. So as we've started to talk about his life, he'll bring up questions now, and it's usually related to the things in his life he hasn't got under control. So now he's asking me about, okay, what do you think about my sexual ethic or something like that? So I don't know. I feel like there's something in there. My guess would be most of the guys that we hang out with that are younger than us, which there's a lot of them, probably have not determined what their moral code is.
Right. I'd say a lot of them are just, they have a code, but they fail at it so often. They internally, they're hoping they would be this particular person. And to me, that's the part of masculinity, is a spot of this ability to actually know what's going on inside of you, right? A guy being able to understand this, I really want to accomplish this, but when you get to those points that you can't do what you hoped you could do, right? You feel enough times, that's the point of real ability because I think masculinity has so much ego and pride mixed in something in our culture that's the missing component, because once you get to that point, you end up to follow the code. Sometimes you just manage in ways that really does not bring life,
So you said that you feel like most guys have a code. Do you think they know they have a code?
I just think, we were designed by God. I think we have a sense of wrong and right to some degree, even if you're maybe not a Christian or following a religion. I think that you have a code inside, a spot. I've not seen any group gangs, that there's not some degree of a code. I think having a proactive code of like even guys that maybe they may not even speak it, but I think they sense what in their mind what they think they should be doing, and I don't know if they declare it much because I think they feel quite a bit of defeat in it. That's my thoughts.
It does seem though like if you really take like the man question, what's the code of a man? It somehow seems to always go back to the ability to control.
Right.
Like if a guy feels like, no, I'm actually in control of that, they would probably go, I'm becoming a man, right?
Yeah.
So that's probably not a bad definition. Like you're becoming a real man when there is some sense of,
Right.
like I know I can stand against, or I can just be different than my other guys that are doing all this other stuff.
Right.
Even sexually, which obviously is ubiquitous for any man.
Yeah.
When we've talked to men about, well, how do you handle all of the temptation stuff? One of the things that I would bring up would be, well, try to whatever you're going to do, try to do it though without any dishonor of other people, without hurting. Like, can you do your own sexuality without exploiting? Which is a key part of even, again, it's everybody's struggle, but even the issue with pornography. When men find out how many young women around the world are literally their lives are being exploited, and you go, can you at least gratify your sexual appetite without causing another person to be hurt? That I found gets their attention. They're like, no, I would like to, at least know I'm not hurting somebody in what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So like, is there an honor to the way that you treat women? Is there an honor to what you do with your money? Does nobody get hurt in other ways?
Right.
I think it's a good way to maybe think about that.
Yeah.
There's this, and it's been a while since I looked it up, but the Maltese cross, and we know this, you mentioned some of the 1%er stuff, some of the outlaw stuff, and I've noticed also with some of the baddest guys that are out there, and by bad, I don't mean guys that are making a bunch of noise, the guys that are the real deal, the genuine
killers.
article, they don't have,
Yeah.
they have self-confidence enough where they don't have to talk about it. And and you notice that with different things in martial arts and music or whatever. The guys that aren't saying a lot are the ones that are like smoking. They're like it. But I talked about the Maltese cross, and I looked this up, and it's been a few years, so I'm not going to be able to give you a backdrop. But the Germans took the Maltese cross, and I don't know what they turned it into, but they also took the swastika, which was a symbol of peace or well-being, and they messed that up as well. But the really cool thing that many people don't know about, and the Maltese cross, it's like the chopper cross, or you'd see it on the old biker movies, the Maltese cross. And a lot of people don't realize that the Maltese cross has 8 points on it, and those 8 points are significant. Like each point of that cross is significant. And I've taken that like with like even Faithful Few. We have a cross that has 12 points on it, and the reason that I thought about the 12 points on that particular cross, and it's in that church that I pastor over the bridge over there, is that 12 points really symbolize the 12 apostles, the 12 tribes, and it has some it's not so esoteric, but it has some backdrop to it. And I say that to say that like the Maltese cross had these 8 attachments, and they were all noble things, like they were man standards, like to live by. And I'm not saying that like I'm man, hear me bark or whatever, but they were noble things. And I feel like where we are in 2024, there's a lot less men passing down the traditions, and here we are.
Yeah.
And we have guys that, and I don't mean to sound masculine in this, but guys that can't even fix a flat or change oil in their wife's car, and no crime against them, but like growing up, that would have been a tragedy if you can't change your own tire, your own flat. But I think things have gotten diluted over the years, and then masculinity, with a lot of stuff in the world, the things that are noble or good get bastardized or diluted through time. The good becomes bad, and the bad becomes good, or this becomes toxic, and I think that's just kind of where we are. With masculinity has become a curse word than it has an encouragement.
Yeah,
and I'll say this other thing too, and I believe a big part of that is because there's so much insecurity in the world. There's a lot of guys that have no idea who they are. And what do you do with that, dude? How's that going to manifest itself? Well, look around.
We got just right here in this city, about 75% of our young men in this town are without a dad.
Yeah.
So I just go, that's 3/4 of them that are never going to be able to have any sense of inner code. So the way that they just live that out is going to be, it's going to be violence. It's going to be a lot of self-defeating behavior. So yeah, it's just crazy to think about within our cities all over the world, the amount of people that do not get raised with a solid male figure, be it a biological dad or a great coach or whatever it is. So, and I think without that, man, dudes are swimming. They don't know what to shoot.
They're already way behind the starting line. when
There's
they
a
start.
saying, and it's an old saying. It's been used. I've used it to death. But it's like a man that doesn't stand for something will fall for anything. And I believe that this younger generation hasn't been shown. We were talking about this. We were eating lunch. We were talking about, like, so many times, you know, you can be the guy that dies from 1,000 pinholes. You know, given time, collectively, you're going to lose blood still, slowly, but, you know, and I think this deflates the tire kind of in that same way, is that when those things don't get passed down, you got guys that are going to be swimming out there, man, and struggling. And a guy that can't discover, like, the contents of his own soul, he's going to do crazy stuff. He's going to manifest in ways that are, you pick one, you know, addiction, crime, you know, a host of a whole other things. Wife abuser, get married, you know, or you know, gosh, pedophiles.
Hanging out in the basement, just video games for 8 hours.
And I think all that does go back to that fatherlessness stuff once again. You know, and you know, like Tim, when you're talking about the reason guys can't change tires or change oil, it's fatherlessness. And because I remember my dad, I remember when, you know, I was like 15, getting ready to drive and everything, he was like, before I take you to get your driver's license, change the tire. You're not driving until you change. I just really remember that. You know, it's like, and he had taught me when I was 10 years old how to change tire. That was the old jack. It was not safe at all. Remember the bumper jacks? You know, that thing
no
would pop
hydraulic.
out, kill you. But yeah, it was, and it's sad when you see this. I just remember.
But the point of your dad was he was trying to prepare you, right?
Yeah.
To be on your own, which is
Exactly.
essence. So
That's all part of it.
to not have anybody ever work on the issues to prepare you. And I mean, anything will take you out these days, but when you haven't been prepared with how to treat a woman, how to take care of your body, how to avoid temptation that can take you out. I mean, you just so the average young man may have no preparation in 12 significant issues.
And that's those pinholes you're talking about.
Collectively, what are you left with? You know,
You're leaking oil right from the
or a
outset.
soul empty corpse. You know.
Yeah.
I think the funny thing is too that, you know, I mean, coming from my paradigm is that often, you know, you want to do things as a husband, you want to be a protector, and you know, having to learn this lesson, you know, here celebrated 34 years in October, beginning of October. And my thing, if my wife would come home and somebody at her work or this and that, my instant thing, and I could blame this on being a St. Louis guy, but I'll just blame this on being me, being human, was like, whose ass do I need to go kick over this? And I don't know if you guys can relate to that, but like I could relate like too heavy on that. And there's a few occasions where it's like I didn't need to go do such and such, you know. But my thing was, I'm going to protect her. I'll die protecting her, you know. But she didn't want that. She just wanted to be heard. She wanted to be received, and all these things that now I know. I've learned those things, and it's made a better me. It's made a better masculine me out of the deal because there's a balance, you know. Instead of just being
thug,
just going, just you know, keeping a tire iron handy or something. You know, that does not. I mean, there's times where if something erupts, you know, I mean, I'm still a firm believer that you don't be a punk ass, you know. But my wife isn't looking for that. That's the last thing she wants.
No, because
and I need to hear that.
Because that's for you. You're wanting to go take the tire iron to the guy, not for her, but for you. I mean, I'm the same way. So it's like, we'll hold down. She wants to be heard, and we always kick into Mr. Fix-It mode. And I can't, man. So I've been married 38 years. The times that Sherry's gone, stop.
Yeah. Don't try to fix this.
Don't try to fix this. I just hear me.
Take me out for ice cream, knucklehead.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Just listen.
Let's call that masculinity 401, because you know that all of us have to start at least protect your wife.
Yeah.
And then as you mature,
sure.
the nuances come in.
We evolve.
You go to 201. Oh, there's
Yeah.
more to it than that. And I remember hearing it's a quote that I've said it probably more I've said it to anything and to myself. I think it's out of the Rob Roy movie. It's honor is a gift a man gives himself. So like when I'm starting with a fatherless kid or whatever, I'll start there. I'll go, hey, no matter what you end up doing or being, do you know at the end of the day, even without a definition of it, would you like to be an honorable man?
Right.
They all say yes, because they know intrinsically that's a better man, right? And so I say, well, then give yourself a gift. Like, give the gift today. Like, start looking at the parts of your life that you go, I need some help. Nobody's ever taught me how to do this. And you got to start asking. That's why I think even this platform hopefully helps. There's a lot of guys that don't have dads. They don't even have a good friend. They don't have a mentor.
Yeah.
So we are hoping that somehow as you're listening to some men talk about stuff, it's kind of like a surrogate dad for a half hour. But even to take a time and give yourself 30 minutes to just listen to some wisdom, that's a gift that you give yourself, and it's honorable. It's not that honorable to just try to figure it out.
Well, I think, but we're raised in such an individualistic.
Individualistic,
There we go.
yes.
Thank you. Society. I mean, it's so much that as soon as pain comes with guys, they almost intuitively know I need to isolate till I get it back together to take control again.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And just that, having somebody who come alongside you and say, you can ask for help. You can do, I mean, that just was not like teaching men to be able to always be needing help and asking for help, right? Which that's very unmasculine in our American society. We're independent, we don't do that.
Right.
And we're designed to be in community. We're designed to have other people. We're not designed to live life alone. So we're in the middle of these marriages and or situations we can't seem to get out of. And when we don't do well, we might even have a standard. We don't do well, we isolate. So the men will isolate. And then, of course, that just adds more of the condemnation.
It compounds that.
Compounds it, and it's so. I think even if I look back, I think I wish I would have known that was a good part of masculinity, was to be able to always have friendships that I can level with and say, I need help. I'm not doing well.
It makes me wonder, as AI is becoming more and more part of our life, as you were talking, Dave, I thought, and I wonder how many young guys are going to just constantly go to AI for the answers.
Right.
Even in the moment, hey, my girlfriend did yada, yada, yada.
What are my three
How I
options?
respond? You know that's
probably
good.
will
That's
be there.
happening.
It will be there for sure.
Hopefully we get some good material somewhere he's grabbing.
Right.
I don't know if, this might be going off the grid, but when I was growing up, everybody said you got to be in an accountability group.
Yeah.
And I've been in like 13 million of those.
Yeah.
And I'd learned that I could actually, because I would like the guys, I would never want these guys to know the bullshit I was involved in.
Yeah.
So I would now say to young guys, I'd say, I don't think an accountability group is really, I think you should look for men that are a few steps ahead of you that you trust. Like even a one-on-one. But I do think that young guys have to go ask the older guys to spend time with them. Like I've constantly, oftentimes been frustrated. I'll be around a lot of great young guys and nobody's asking for help.
Right.
And then something happens, then the crap hits the fan, and then you jump in. And I remember I've said it many times, but like, why didn't you call me? Like I've always said, I'm available to you. When I grew up, we were told, if you want help learning how to change a tire, go ask the guy.
Right.
So it was a virtue to actually go, no, I'm not going to waste this guy's time. I'm actually going to go up and say, can I take an hour, or can you meet with me once a month for a... I'm finding that younger guys don't have that same, they actually think they're bugging us to ask us for our time.
Well, they're not.
Yeah. But I think you'll be more honest with a mentor than you would be with a bunch of dudes that you're...
One time we had a thing at the church, I'm a part of it, and we said, okay, we've observed for years who seems to be doing quite well, growing and maturing and kind of living out their true identity in better ways. Who's not? What's the difference? What's happened? Right. And what we realized is they had two things. They had friendships and they had mentors. They needed both, because we had some people who just would try to be around mentors, but really never knew how to form a friendship. And that got kind of weird. That didn't work. But when you have, like you saying, just accountability group of a bunch of friends is not quite enough. It's they really need friendship where they're just doing life together, but they also need older mentors or someone who's ahead of them, right, that they can just naturally know they go to. And they can go to 0 to 60 really quick, right? They can just go right down to it and say, but those older people may not be their best friends. Totally. But they play a big part in having both mentor and friendship.
Yep, it's good.
Yeah, I think, I look back on life, and I've mentioned this before in different discussions or talks, and my success. And success is based on not like me against this brother or you guys. It's like me against me, me against the old me.
Right.
And in my successes, again, it's a personal thing, not like, hey, check this out, but like it's always been, I would call him an older brother in life, and that's been with the construction trades. There's guys out there that are brilliant, guys that have taught me a lot, and I'll still never be like on their level, like a master builder, or this guy's that's a master plumber. These guys, brilliant guys, been in the trades, or guys. My cousin, I was the oldest boy of the youngest son, and my cousin is the oldest boy of the oldest son of my dad's side of the family, and he rides. And so I got in motorcycles because he was older than me, and he was showing up on the chopper, and I'm like, yeah, I'm doing that. And so like he influenced me to ride. I love motorcycles. And that's because of him. And he showed me, and he's a great builder, he's a great wrench, but he's a great friend, even though he's family. And the same goes for people in my spiritual life. It's always my success, and again, I define success on my own terms. Forget you guys. This is about me,
right?
And I mean that on a sincere level.
Sure.
But it's always been because I've had some older dude hooking me up, and he's been patient with me, even though I'm not a patient person to be around. And he's shown me, whether it be like auto body or mechanics or changing that heater coil and that, or whatever. And it's been the result of older, I'm not on a Hulk Hogan level, but brothers in my life that has elevated me to where I am, with more to come.
Yeah.
With more to come. And as well as you. We were sharing some of our connection initially over lunch while you guys were out chasing parts and stuff. And again, the reason I can be blessed and be awesome, and I mean awesome on my own level, not pretentious.
You're awesome, not my awesome.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's because people have helped make me awesome, and if we are that mindset, and I try to be more conscious of it and paying back, because people hook me up, and I'm an asshole at times, and I'm trying to be less and less, but like people like poured out their time, whether it be through music or through mechanics or whatever, and it's like the very least I can do is suck it up. And no, there might be a difficult young man out there, but man, somebody sucked up my nonsense and helped get me to where I am now, and I'm thankful to be where I am. And so I gotta be of that same thing, and you can't save the world, you can't change every dude, but in that same mindset of paying it forward and making sure, like if you see a gap, like that's an opportunity. And I believe in our chivalrous like spirit, that's the very least we can do. And I don't mean that should be the least thing that we do, but that should be something that we should be conscious of, whether it be in a church or in a coffee house. We should repay that, because the world really needs it.
Yeah, it does. There used to be places where, and this is the whole third place philosophy. Part of the idea of having a third place, a place that you can hang out, which, like, we're sitting in here at the Post Commons, here in Alton. It's a third place. It's places people hang out. But back in the day, there was always places like that where there was old guys sitting around, and then young guys could kind of hang out with them and get that kind of stuff. I remember when I was a kid, my grandparents were from a small town, and I'd spend like every other weekend there, then I'd spend the summers there. And I loved, a couple times a week, my granddad and I, we would go down to, there was one, it was like a general store that had been there for 100 years. And there was always about 5 or 6 old guys sitting out playing checkers. I loved sitting and listening to those old guys. I mean, they're sitting around, they're talking, they're cussing Nixon, they're talking this, they're talking that. But there was a lot to learn, actually. There was a lot good to learn, and a lot of things you wanted to avoid.
Yeah.
But you learned, by listening to these old guys talk. And I think that's part of losing the town hall and losing a lot of that. But once again, this gap that's been generated, this generation gap that's probably more prevalent than ever now. And that, of course, that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to kind of close that gap and offer a model that says, hey, let's get the old and the young back together.
Mm-hmm. And you find they're not looking for brilliance. Like, I don't think we've said anything like remarkably different here, but sometimes you just want to listen in to dudes talking about anything meaningful that has some substance, and just that, it lets guys know there's other men that are actually working on themselves. And I think that's the secret sauce. Like, there's some intentionality behind living besides just, doing your own thing. So hopefully this is an encouragement for some dudes.
Yeah, the one thing that I would say though is, it's easy sometimes to, I idolize the old of what happened. And there's, I had one guy used to always say, in the good old days, I just remember more old than I do good. But I do think there's some good things to look back that we've lost over time. But I actually feel like the one thing I feel like, even though that's all true, I think there's what I grew up with a really good dad in a family that stayed together and had high integrity. It changed me. And I realize that's very odd for people nowadays. That's very odd to have that possibility. So I'm very grateful for that. So in saying all that, though, is that what I realized that was so missing in masculinity, even though my dad lived it out well, I think, and gave me great models, was understanding as a man, what do you do with this stuff going on inside of you emotionally, right? How do you become emotionally mature, right? I just didn't have any of that, right? I mean, I had great principles I lived by. It pushed me.
Hard work, don't lie.
Yeah, oh hell yeah.
You could do all those and not be self-aware.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I remember thinking, so, when I will meet with younger guys, I just to spice it up, get down to something, that they're needing help or whatever, I say, so how about your parents? When your parents raised you and you started like tipping over and falling down, would they have taken to the doctor to figure that out? Oh yeah, they did everything. In fact, we had this one thing and they almost lost their life savings and they got me back on track. So how about education? Oh, they have good parents. Say, oh yeah, my parents were like, we're going to help your brain. We're going to help you learn. We're going to how to think. So what about your emotions? How they teach you your brain? How do you do with anger? What do you do with despair? What do you do with sadness? What do you do with grief? I mean, and I know what the answer is almost before I ask it. Like, I don't really know what you're talking about sometimes.
Yeah.
In fact, they don't sometimes even know how to respond to evaluate it.
Yeah, right.
So that has to be big, right? Because, and then you get married and think, I wonder why this is going so rough, because they have no emotional development.
And when you get married, then you've got two cultures that collide because it's how her family dealt with conflict and fight, flight, how'd they do it, his, and then those come together. How are you going to work?
And you have
all
male,
that
female
out?
who have
layer
probably
after layer.
ahead of us in
It's a
emotional.
miracle.
Is a miracle engine.
Freaking miracle.
So I think that's a big thing where guys don't understand. I mean, I think a lot of guys with great intention, it's just the internal stuff. They don't know how to process pain or disappointment or feeling ashamed. I mean, all those things are just, those affect the way you either, go deep into becoming individualistic or determined and running over people or, or giving up.